Hello, I'm Shannon Hopkins, one of the co-founders of Rooted Good, and co-hosting this season with me is my colleague Mark Elsdon. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Shannon.
So we are delighted that Wesleyan Impact Partners has partnered with us at Rooted Good to do this whole season focused on church assets, imagining good futures. In America right now, there is a huge opportunity the church is facing related to its building and land use. This season is full of amazing stories of churches across the country that are rising to this moment. We're seeing perseverance, passion, creativity, courage, renewal, and rebirth. And we're introducing you to the pastors and leaders that are stepping out and showing us a new way. Their stories are phenomenal, and their work is helping to lay a path into a new and good future for the church and the world. Today, we're joined by Patrick Duggan, who's the executive director of the UCC Building and Loan Fund. And we're just super excited. He's dynamic. He's been doing this work for over 30 years. Mark, what excited you about this conversation with Patrick?
Yeah, I've known Patrick for quite a while, and he is one of the most incredible, thoughtful leaders in this space. He works for a loan fund that provides financing and technical assistance for congregations that are developing their property, that are building, that are actually doing these projects that people sort of so often talk about. But what I think is really amazing about Patrick is that he does this all with such a clear lens towards mission and purpose and why we do this work, right? And so in this we had such a great conversation with him talking about how money and mission have to align and have to work in concert with each other for true highest and best use on buildings and land that churches own. What did you find inspiring about the conversation?
Oh my gosh, I could just listen to Patrick all day long because he's got so many stories. And I just love it that he makes it real, that he told the story of both the practical work they're doing, but also just this call again to the church to be focused on mission. If it's just about money, go do something else. But mission and then figure out how to make it work, then we're talking. Yeah.
I mean, we did talk about taxes too, which is a question that comes up a lot. As you know, people ask us all the time, what about taxes? In fact, we have a tool called What About Taxes? But
we do.
Patrick has some great answers to that. And I think really assures us that that kind of question, while important, is not the one that should be driving this work forward. So let's dive into this conversation with Patrick.
Let's do it. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Shannon, how are you?
Very good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, in this podcast, we're talking about this moment the church is facing across the U.S. as it engages with the opportunities and challenge related to its building and land use. Now, there have been a lot of stories in the news about churches closing, churches selling, and churches doing new development on their land. And you've had a pretty front row seat for many years. You're an expert in financing, taxes, and other practical matters related to social enterprise and property development on church property. But before we dive into some of that, you also have a vital message for churches that are looking at developing property. You say very clearly, keep missional. What do you mean by that?
Yes, thank you for plugging Mark's book, The Case for Missional.
Well, you're
missional. Yeah. And Gone for Good is the chapter I wrote. I've been in this work for probably 30 years in some form, and it's never been driven by the money you can make in real estate. If that were the case, I'd be a multimillionaire perhaps. But primarily working with churches around how do you advance mission in this day and age? And how does that shape your space, the building, the community around you? Um, and I feel very strongly that as churches think about where they are in this really crazy time of transition, that you have to start with your why. Why are you here in the first place? And that speaks to mission. What's your reason for doing ministry? What's your reason for being a church? And you cannot disconnect that from your place. One of the challenges of many inner city churches, for example, or churches in uh, 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 poor areas or rural areas, is the phenomenon called commuter church, where people don't live in the community anymore, but they still attend the church. And so there tends to be a disconnect in those cases from what's happening in the communities that the churches serve. And so once we have this idea of our worship, our spirituality being focused on a building where we go to a few times a week to practice whatever we call religion, we've kind of missed the target in the sense of why we were placed there in the first place. And so a lot of what we do is around helping churches, first of all, reconnect with their why, developing a vision that takes them from where they are to the place in ministry that this mission drives them to. And then how are you and how you should be connected to community. And by helping churches do that, and we specifically help that through our training and capacity building. We train between 800 and 1,000 leaders a year at Church Building and Loan Fund, really for the purpose of helping churches reorient themselves to this ministry for today. And once you do all of that, and you have a sense of your why, where you're going, and the vision, and you have a sense of the needs of the community, then you can talk about, okay, now what do we do with this property we're on? How should we use it? Maybe we should repurpose it. Maybe we should do something different with it. And that kind of drives the projects that we do. But it's all begins with mission, because that's where we are. Now, I never talked about the chapter, but in essence, I think a key factor of the chapter is where we talk about highest and best use. And there are 3 or 4 areas that the Appraisal Institute identifies for highest and best use. 3 of them make sense for all kinds of property, but the 4th one, maximally productive, in typically means how much money you can make. And we argue that maximally productive for a nonprofit or a church is how well you advance your mission, because churches and nonprofits are not profit-making institutions. So how can you make decisions around how much money you make? Now, I'm sure there's a lot of ways to argue that's not really what it means, but we take it to mean that, because that's where we start with churches, and it drives everything else. So that's a long answer to a short question, but
I think it needs a complete answer. But I'm wondering, as you think about that maximum usage, um, that highest and best use,
maximally
but
productive, yeah. Mhm.
yes, thank you, maximally productive. Can you tell me a story of a church that's doing that? Like one
Oh
of your
gosh.
kind of, I know you have hundreds of stories, but give us a story of a church that is maximally productive that you think's a story everyone should know.
So I think a current story, a church we're in the middle of and about to fund $3.5 million for about a $7-8 million project, and would be the 3rd round of debt we've provided for this church in Allentown, Pennsylvania, a Resurrected Life Community Church. So when you look for a property in the commercial real estate world, or if you're, buying a home, what's the three most important things? Location, 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 right? So this pastor founded a church, I guess it's about 25 years ago, maybe about 25, 26 years ago. And this guy's a, doctorate in ministry, graduate degrees, ran for Congress. I mean, he's a very capable and brilliant guy. Him and his wife founded the church at their kitchen table. And when it was time for building, they looked for the poorest community in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and found the lowest income census tract in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Most people say, well, that's not where you want to put a church. But literally, I mean, there were streetwalkers and broken syringes in front of the building. I mean, it was just all kinds of stuff happening. But in his mind, right, in terms of mission, this is the ideal place to be if you want to have an impact that reflects the gospel. And we define the gospel as Luke 4, where Jesus talks about the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. We believe that's Jesus' announcement of his core purpose, his personal mission. And we believe that Matthew 25, where about the sheep and the goats, and when you've done it for the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you've done it for me. This is how Jesus is going to judge our impact and effectiveness as church folk, as in ministry. So for me, he was thinking maximally productive without I don't know if he knows what the appraisal institutes, matrix for making real estate investments are. But in terms of mission, it's simple. If you really want to make an impact on poverty, go to the poorest place, because anything you do is going to change the dynamic. And he started a church. Fast forward to today, he did everything that the community needed, right? And the biggest one was schools. All the schools in this community were failing. All of the scores you want for children and families, all of them were low. All right. So he started an after-school program. He started a preschool, and he started a freedom school, which is a program by the Children's Defense Fund. Today, we're about to fund them to expand their preschool from 300 to 500 students. It is whatever the top number rating for a school is, he has that in Allentown, Pennsylvania. All the children graduate from this preschool bilingual. Okay, a number of them are already Latinx, but not all of them are when they enter, but all of them are bilingual. They have all of I forget what you call them, but there's certain indices that a child should have by the time they're ready for first grade in terms of being able to tie your shoes and, all kinds of stuff. They have all of that. 90% of the teachers walk to work, because what he did was hire the local folks. Pennsylvania has free community college. So they'll send these folks who just want to take care of their kids. A lot of them bringing their kids to the school, send them to community college, and several of them have gotten degrees, right? So think about all the impacts just in that, in terms of education, reading, literacy. They're on grade level when they graduate. They're helping the families, so on and so forth. So we're now helping his building, right? Is where this happens, in that same place. A church that was in the center of downtown Allentown, which is about a 5-minute walk from this poorest census tract, was closing, Zion UCC. And they had made a decision that when they close, this is not typical, by the way, that a church has the wherewithal when they get down to a handful of members to make wise decisions. That doesn't usually happen. unfortunately. But they decided they did not want to sell for the building to become an office building or condos, and because the downtown of Allentown, it's like a tale of two cities. If you walk 3 or 4 blocks, you got the glitzy, high-end office building, condos, all of that, and then you walk to Pastor Greg's church, and it's total opposite. They didn't want to sell to that, so they decided to sell the property to Pastor Greg for $1, knowing that he would use it for a different purpose. Now that place is going to is now the location for the Freedom School, which convenes college students every summer. I don't know, about 100 college students, and they do all. You can look that up on Children's Defense Fund. I'm not even sure what they do, but it's a long time program. And while we are renovating the space in the Forest Census Tract in Allentown, it will be where they do worship, and all of their other activities will convene while we are rebuilding the church and the school building in the other end of town. That to me, so now, we first refinanced the purchase of the property, the original property. He'll tell you the story, but the church wouldn't sell it directly to him. This is 25 years ago when he wanted to buy the building. They sold it to a developer who then tacked on about a 900% profit and then sold it to him. And he had almost a predatory interest rate. So just by refinancing the loan he had for the original purpose, we saved him thousands of dollars a month. Then when he got the Zion property in downtown, they needed $1 million to bring this space up to code for the schools and everything else. We did that loan. All of that on the income from all of the activities. The church isn't putting anything out for these costs, except the first cost was the mortgage on the property. The church is paying that. And now the $3.5 million is going to go for the expansion of the school from 300 to 500 students and all the other work they're doing there, which will be funded by the income stream is the state money for preschools. So we've helped this church grow as a community institution, and we've helped this church create the kind of impact that we think matters for a church. Now, that story could have gone any number of ways, and I'm sure you can figure out how it could have been. But because of this, he is now on a path. And last week, I met another CDC while we were in Indianapolis, which I told him the CDC that I visited in Indianapolis is Allentown Resurrected Life CDC in 10 years, a CDC that has 5, 6, 8 projects in the community, some housing, some education, other kinds of impacts. That's the kind of development that I think the church should be doing.
So the highest and best use of that Zion property you're talking about was $1.
$1.
But I love it because
no sense financially.
That's exactly what you're talking about, though, right? It's it's the lives changed on that property. It's the community impact. That's the highest and best use, not the cash that it generated. And sometimes I think we get a little astray in the way we think about our assets.
It's the two fish and bread parable. Like, how did they come up with all that fish and bread for 5,000 people and then have baskets left over? It does not make mathematical sense. And there's all kind of people who try to explain the logic of that. But it's the same kind of thing. How do you invest $1 and literally you generate millions of dollars in impact through that dollar? So I mean, I agree. It's only a gospel thing.
Yeah, I love it. It's so great. Well, we want to pivot a little bit because you just said generating millions of dollars, right? That's exciting. I think people are interested in that, and generating enormous impact in people's lives. But one of the questions that we get asked a lot, I mean, I think almost never have I spoken about this and not had this question come up in the first 3 questions.
Sure.
What about taxes? So a church is getting into this activity that's social business, social enterprise, property revenue generation from something besides the offering plate. What about taxes? Are they jeopardizing their tax exempt status? How do they deal with taxation? Um, what do you say to folks that are honestly sometimes kind of freaking out about
Sure.
that
Sure.
question?
Sure. Well, interesting, in the Allentown case, there's no issue with taxes because everything they're doing is nonprofit. I mean, education and that kind of thing. Um, Now, but let's say they decided to rent some of their space for office use. Um, and let's say, the downtown property became a really hot area. They just used a portion of that building for small business development. And let's say, it's determined that that's a taxable use. Okay. So what do? You call us and say, what about taxes? And we say, well, you pay them. And they go, well, wait a minute. What? They go, what? So, and I always say this, if this unrelated business income issue is what churches are afraid of. And they should be concerned about it because if you really, let's say I use this a lot. They used to have a thing where they sell you light bulbs cheap, and that's a fundraiser, right? You sell light bulbs, right? People sell a few hundred light bulbs. They bring in a couple $1,000s. But let's say you really get good at the light bulb business, and you wind up selling $1 million in light bulbs. Now that probably triggers the unrelated business income tax, which means the thing that you're doing is not really related to your mission, but it's where you're generating most of your money. So you would have some kind of tax. Let's say it's 20% tax. I'm just guessing. Let's say that's 200,000. Oh my God, what do we do? Mhm. Well, from $1 million in revenue, you pay your $200,000 in taxes. I mean, it's really that simple. I've never met a church that has that problem of so much unrelated business income that they have to pay taxes. But and I'm just saying this tongue in cheek, but the reality is that's why we have lawyers. So you talk to your accountant, you talk to your attorneys, but you don't talk to them when you get the tax bill. Mm-hmm. You talk to them when you're thinking about something you want to do that seems to you might not be within your mission. And if you get a really good attorney or accountant that knows social enterprise and stuff like that, there's ways to even structure those kind of businesses so that taxes are minimal in terms of how you structure it. And I'm not going to get into that because I'm not an attorney and I'm not an accountant. But I know attorneys and accountants who can help with that. So it's really more of a non-issue. And it speaks to another thing that we as church leaders like, and I can say this because I served the church for 28 years and I was in ministry before that. We like to think we're experts at just about everything, or we can just move forward on anything and just get a couple of volunteers and it's good. It speaks to the reality that we have to know that our strength is ministry. As soon as we start talking about real estate development, social enterprise, anything that's really not typically part of the ministry we understand in churches, we need to partner with people who can help us. Mm-hmm. And that's in taxes, that's in any expertise. And it's not, mm-hmm. It's good that you have volunteers in the church, but when you really go into something that becomes an ongoing project, you need outside experts who are not people you need people you can fire and you can't fire a church member because you're paying for expertise and you have to, and when it gets to a certain level, it's important to have that. But even in the beginning, we're also good in the church of getting free help. We'll just reach out to anybody. Start with that. And if you get good free help, then they'll lead you to the good paid help too. So I think that's one way to think about the tax issue and a lot of other concerns when church kind of moves out of our comfort zone of what we call church and start doing new things.
I want to come in on this tax thing for a second, because I think there's what do you do when you start generating a lot of unrelated mission and business expense? But I think actually what people are worried about is they're worried about losing their tax
exempt status.
And it feels like it's paralyzing. And I wonder how do you respond to that when people are worried about that?
Well, I tell them about the Girl Scout case, because this is not new. It's just new to us, right? They were sued years ago, or the YMCA case. But the YMCA was sued by Jack LaLanne because they were for-profit gyms. I don't even think Jack LaLanne is around anymore. but and both of those lawsuits were about nonprofits not having a unfair advantage because they're nonprofits, but they should really be treated like businesses, and it had to do with taxes and all that kind of stuff. The Girl Scout case, Girl Scouts won because the court found that the Girl Scouts was not a cookie company, because the issue was girls at that time, whenever that lawsuit was, I guess it's been a while, decades probably. But whenever the suit happened, during the Girl Scout cookie drive, at that time, I don't know if it still exists, they were selling more cookies than Nabisco and all of the big brands. I mean, they were really killing it with cookies, right? And the Girl Scouts were able to demonstrate that they are not a cookie business, but they are a leadership program for girls. Similar to the outcome of the Jack LaLanne case, right? With the Y, they proved that they're not a for-profit gym, but I don't know what, they're something else. They're a nonprofit, organization. So there could be challenges, but what I'm saying is there's case law, right? And if you talk to the right attorneys, if you talk to an accountant, they probably could tell you. Which is why you have to have expert thinking before you start or when you start. Because a lot of times we just say things out of fear. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my tax exempt status. And the Girl Scouts and the Y was in danger of losing their tax exempt status. So what did they do? They demonstrated through and this is what I've learned from a couple of folks, experts in this arena. When you even describe a program, right, in a proposal, you talk about the mission of your program and how it connects to the operation of that entity or that program you're doing. Everywhere and all throughout the document, when you have a meeting, in the minutes, here's our mission and here's how this relates to mission. So in every document, a letter, a memo, the program design. So now let's say you get sued. You got years of documents showing how this is how you advance your mission. Not just you coming to prove it because, I'm a good pastor and I've done this for years, but it's in your documents, in your program design, it's in your correspondence, it's everywhere. The participants are talking about, here's my mission and here's how, so you gotta bake it into your program so that it's real. It's not just like churches today. Most churches, we ask this all the time, what's your mission statement? Nobody knows. Or they have something vague like, we exist to advance the gospel of Jesus Christ and to save souls from damnation, whatever they call it. And okay, that's good. Now, how does that apply to your feeding program or your giveaway program or whatever? You can't really connect it. Mission speaks to not just what you do, but why are you in this place doing it? And what calls that? There has to be a connection. That means that even if you're a commuter church, you serve that community. It's the idea of parish that the Catholics talk about, and some of the other Protestant parish, meaning this is a community that it almost belongs to the church. It's is designated for the care of that entity. It's place based, and you have to have that if you're really doing what the kind of ministry that the Bible speaks about. So long answer, another long answer, short question, but
It's
that's
okay.
how we would talk about the legalities and the issues, or the concerns about stepping out on doing some really innovative kinds of ministry that churches are doing now.
That's great. Just goes back to mission. Mission driving all of our.
It's why we do this. If I don't understand any other reason to be in this than to be doing things to to advance what we believe. Why be in a nonprofit space? Just go and do it for profit. I just want to make money. Cool, nothing wrong with that. But that's what the for profit is for. So yeah.
What you're talking about, Patrick, is a bit of a caution, or kind of a challenge, or I don't know, a balance to the. Sometimes churches are just trying to solve a money problem.
Yeah.
But if they're only trying to solve a money problem, it's going to create other problems. I mean, that's where there's the issue. But if right, because this work around social enterprise, property development, it's not just a money. If it's only a money problem, I've said the same thing in the development I did and lived with for 20 years, on a campus center. If we were doing it just to be a landlord and make money, oh my gosh, there's no way.
You wouldn't be doing it because it doesn't
doing
pencil
it.
out.
There's no way. It's not worth it. It's just, people, and I think that's important, because I think people are drawn to stories, books, whatever, right? That say, oh, do this, build that. But if we're just trying to kind of solve a real estate or money problem, there's no point. I mean, it is about mission. And even the questions around money, taxes, and so on are all tied up with that same question about mission.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
And it's also about your theology, because, not every strand of Christianity thinks this way, right? There's a lot of organizational and historical investment in an idea of church that really doesn't have to do with, eradicating poverty. And so some traditions would consider, you know, uh, 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 helping redeveloping, doing affordable housing, for example, as secular, because it doesn't align with the idea of justice is outside of their thinking around what church folks should be about. And I'm not trying to misalign some other folks, but we go to we're part of an industry, Church Building Loan Fund, of several hundred organizations. We have annual gathering by an organization called Denominational Investors and Loan Administrators. I don't know where they get that name from, DILA. And all of us gather. And so there's a bunch of us, some segment of us, I haven't done a survey, so I can't tell you a number, that are really focused on what we think is the leading edge of church property right now, which is redevelopment around mission, not necessarily religious uses, but around the things we were talking about with Allentown and other places. And then there are others that they're not interested in that. They think you only should be building churches, church buildings, maybe church schools. Parsonages are okay. When you start getting into doing stuff in poor communities, now you're doing social, this is the social gospel, which they don't believe in. I don't even know what the social I know what it is, but I don't designate social gospel. Luke 4 doesn't say social gospel anywhere. It just says, this is what I'm here to do. So it's also theology. And I don't judge them who think that way. I just disagree. I don't believe Jesus called us to go to church on Sunday and Wednesday prayer meeting and, you know, and then go home. I think there's more to it than that. There's more to it than this personal piety and, you know, occasionally sending money to help the poor somewhere else.
Well, we're all agreed on that. I think that's why we're in this conversation. And I feel like what the thing that we're aligned on, right, is like you focus on mission and the economic model will follow. And that we're facing this opportunity today around redevelopment of church assets, which just gives us an opportunity to ask different questions.
Sure.
Or ask the questions in a different way, right? Than like our grandparents asked, right?
Yeah, one thing you said, Shannon, the economic part will follow, should follow.
Yeah.
Because you do have to, you know, and I'll give you an example. Church applied, great project, small project, under $1 million, sent in their application, and they're like, what happened? We haven't heard anything. And so I look into it and I'm like, wonder why we haven't moved forward with this. Because, you know, we asked for financial statements from the church. And this is not atypical. They sent in their bank statements as their financial statement. And we said, we've emailed them back and said, look, we need your financial statements. And now it's been about 6 months. So now what we're seeing, not the project is great. It would even pencil out just in your head if you knew the numbers. But you still gotta, and they're wondering why nobody's responding to them because they've applied several places. And I said, see, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. But when I looked at it, you don't know you don't understand the financial statement. And that's because this is a little church. They've been around forever, but the economics didn't follow the zeal and the mission. There's some gaps in knowledge, understanding of the world. Because we definitely, you know this, we are interacting in that world of finance. With people who don't care anything about your church. They care about take care of the money, make it back, give it back, use it properly. So there is a need to have that strength as you do these things.
What would you do? What would you say to a church that's in that position? Because I think there's probably more in that position than not in some ways. I mean, as far as like, does that mean they can't do this? Does that mean like what's the strategy there? What's the next step for a church like that?
So when we were a sleepy fund, somebody would just maybe fly out and just sit with them and show them how to do a financial statement. We're a little bit busier than that now. So we have 2 or 3 organizations that help churches with their finances, who can show them how to get on QuickBooks. Now, it's not enough. Most churches, unless they have somebody in-house that's a bookkeeper or an accountant, getting QuickBooks and just putting stuff in doesn't mean you're going to understand what you're doing. So that's a good thing to do, but you also need some support. And they're not extraordinarily expensive. There is a cost, but there are people who can help with bookkeeping. We have one that's a UCC clergy who does a lot of United Church of Christ churches. We're United Church of Christ, but others as well. And we connect them up with that. Sometimes if it's really easy, we also have a template that we can send them that's very simple income statement and balance sheet that, a 3rd grader could understand with its short information. But a lot of times that's not so easy to understand either. So we're okay with educating to a certain extent. We'll walk with them. We'll connect them with the consultant, have the, books, the one of them will do it just for this loan, get your books together for a set fee so that you have them set up that you can then continue. So there are ways. Now, does everybody do that? No bank is going to do that. They'll either, just kind of say, yeah, we'll get to you, or they'll just say no. And not every fund will do it. But this is our ministry. Church Building Loan Fund is 170 years old. It was started as a ministry of the church. It's been a ministry of the church. So we've done, back in the day, they created a template for an architectural template for how to build a church. So it's always been that kind of technical assistance that we'll offer or connect churches to, because we understand you didn't go into ministry to become a finance expert, and there's not a single course in seminary on church. Maybe there's 15 minutes in a course on church finances, but there's no major even in that for persons in ministry. So we understand that, and it's part of the work we do.
So on a number of these questions, partnering again is going to be part of the answer.
Absolutely.
Finding partners, paying probably a little bit for professional help,
Yes.
getting help, getting tax help, getting legal help, getting accounting help. And that's just all part of the cost of doing this work. That's all right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And there are lots of people out there with the knowledge.
Yes.
That can help. So
lots of
go to them. Okay.
I know one. Rooted Good is one. And there are many
we
others.
don't do that work, but either.
There's other kinds.
So, okay. Before we wrap up, we want to ask a series of rapid fire questions, Patrick.
Sure.
Sitting in your chair, Patrick, what is one thing you wish people in the pew knew?
That's a great question. And I think I wish they knew that this is not the end we're going through. It's the start of something very different. Mm-hmm. Like the acorn in the forest fire. It's going to blow up and be something very new. And there's a lot of fear in congregations right now. Not all of them, in certain congregations where they've been impacted by the pandemic. And what are we going to do? That's the thing I would say.
What is one thing you wish seminaries were training for right now?
Balance sheets, income statements. I love to see more people like you, Mark, MBA and MDiv. More of the practical side of what we're talking about here, because I think everybody understands the mission, but how do you marry that to the technical? So more of that kind of thing.
What would you say to a pastor that's at the start of this work in a congregation?
Call us as somebody like us to help you. Listen more than you talk. Preachers know how to preach. I had a guy call me the other day. He needs a couple $100,000. It took him 45 minutes to get to that. And he's calling me the expert, but he's talking the whole time. So.
So Patrick, as we wrap up, we're asking all of our guests this season one question. As you consider the reality of the world and the witness of the church, what is your hope for the church?
That American Christianity stops self-destructing. That we come to terms with our differences among the strands of believers and recognize that we're in this together. And I'm not pointing fingers at any side. I think if we call ourselves Christian in any form, we hold responsibility for what's going on in the church now. If we're pointing to somebody else, then we're part of the problem.
Yeah. Thank you. It's been so great talking to you. Folks should definitely connect with UCC Building and Loan Fund for resources, and we just love partnering with you and working with you.
Same here. I love you guys. You're great with what you do. You make me better.
So likewise, likewise. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Patrick. We'll see you soon.